Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Nkrumah Mensah, author of Anne of Survivor. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to meet you, Terry.
I am so excited to have you. Before we really dive into all of the nitty-gritty, can you give listeners just a quick idea of what they're going to get when they open up Anne of Survivor?
They are going to get, I hope, a nice romp of a story. When I started the story, I wanted to be like a nice round adventure, but it does have a lot of heart to it and a lot of growing up. So it is a coming of age novel.
Right, exactly. So that's something that I want to talk about. We'll get to it in a little bit, is that idea of the coming of age. But before we get there, where did the idea for the story come from? So you have the little rich girl who doesn't like the way her parents are treating her, and she runs away from home and changes who she is completely from Anne to a man, right? And tries to and she's on a ship. Like everything is completely different. Where did that come from?
Honestly, so it came originally from my friend. She was going through an arranged marriage, and she did get married. So I was like, well, what if she ran? Like, what would that look like?
Okay.
And if she ran in today's times, what would you do? You'd get a job and you'd live your life. But I was also reading Twelfth Night by Shakespeare at the time, my favorite Shakespearean play, by the way. And there's this whole idea of everyone pretending to be someone else and everyone wearing masks. And I loved that. And in that story, Viola becomes Cesario. And I was like, I could do that.
Yeah. I love how this story has an origination in real life. Mine often do the same, where something will happen and I'll think, I wonder what would happen if. And that's what you did. It's like, well, what would happen if my friend ran? What would happen if my friend ran and decided to be disguised as a man instead?
Exactly.
Right. And so, I thought that was a lot of fun. That was great. Why this genre?
It just came to me that way. Honestly,
Okay.
I kind of feel oftentimes that I'm just sitting along and then characters just come to me.
Yeah.
And like I said, I kind of wanted this to be action, adventure, rebellion, but it really did turn into something else. As Anne moves along through her journey, she has this growing arc that I wasn't expecting her to have. And then that's why it became like a coming of age novel. And I enjoy writing young adult more than I enjoy anything else. And I have kids and I love telling them stories. So it just works out.
It just works out really well. The same with you. I tell people I have characters that live in my head. And they tell me stories and I have to sit down and get them on paper. And it does make me sound a little crazy, like maybe potentially I need, medication. But I do, I have these characters and they whisper to me and they sometimes completely take over. I think I know what I'm writing. And the next thing you know, nope, that's not what we're writing at all because the character has taken over.
That's I try to explain that to people all the time. I'll be writing and I will start yelling at my characters and my daughter's like, well, then don't make him do that. And I'm like, well, he's doing it anyway.
It's like I have no choice. You don't understand. So do you consider yourself a pantser or a plotter?
I would have to say I'm more of a plotter.
You're more of a plotter?
I think I'm more of a plotter.
You're more of a plotter. And yet you still let your characters take over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have like a grand idea and of what I want to happen. And then the characters get me there. And sometimes they'll change the plot.
Right.
But I'm okay with, I'm flexible. So
she's a flexible plotter. That's what she is.
I am a flexible plotter.
I love that. So let's get back to the genre idea. You say you love writing young adult. It is a fantastic book. For me, I wonder sometimes about genres in general, not just young adult, but any genre, because sometimes I think they limit people. I am not typically a young adult reader. So had I not had this show and had you approach me, I would have never picked up Anna Survivor, because I would have said, oh, that's young adult and I'm a 60 plus woman. Right. And so I'm not going to read this book. And yet I read it and I loved it and it was fantastic. And I would have missed out on a really fabulous book because of the label. And I'm wondering, do you ever find that to be true with labels like that? Like, I don't know, people get kind of stuck in what they will and won't read.
I have to say, absolutely, because my ex-husband would not read this book because it's fiction, it's young adult, and he figured it was fantasy. And there's like some fantastical aspects to it, but I wouldn't call this story fantasy.
No,
not at all. So because of that, he wouldn't read the story. So I wrote a different story, a contemporary story that was more adult. And he read that. And he's like, well, is there a sequel to this? And I was like, no, I'm writing it. I'm still in the middle of something. And he wanted to read something. And I was like, well, then read Anne. Read Anne. And because he read it. Right. It's because it's done. Right. It's more my genre. I only wrote this story so that you would read something I wrote. But this is my genre. So he read it and he said, this is a better story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like,
because you know where you belong.
Exactly. I'm like, well, that's what I write.
Right. Right. I think that it's, I understand why we have genres, because can you imagine like walking into a bookstore and just,
oh my gosh, you'd be overwhelmed.
Having no idea where to walk. Like,
exactly.
And you would just walk in and just start like touching things, right? Like it would be really hard. On the other hand, genres can really limit people. I know people who say, oh, I only read historical fiction.
Exactly.
Or even more, I only read World War II historical fiction. And
oh my gosh.
Right. And not that there's a problem with reading historical fiction or World War II historical fiction, but boy, does that leave out a lot of possibilities out there.
It really does. It really does. And I will say, even I used to say, I don't want to read romance because it kind of seems hokey, whatever. Right. Well, there are so many romance stories out there that are mysteries, or they're historic, or, there's so many layers that you can put onto one genre.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is some romance, like, did it follow completely follow the romance trope? Or did it go outside the bounds of? I tend to like the ones that are more what I call a love story.
Exactly.
As opposed to the romance trope. It's like, I don't mind having romance in my book. I just don't know that I want it to be the romance trope so much. But even then, I've read really good ones of those that I've enjoyed. And so you almost have to kind of put that like behind you. It's one of the reasons I tell people that everyone should join a book club.
I agree.
Because then you have to read selections from other people.
Exactly.
Right? Things that you would never pick up on your own.
Exactly. And then you might, from that point, introduce yourself to a whole new genre and a whole new world.
Exactly.
And never judge a book by its cover.
Well, and so like never judge it by a genre, right? Because you just don't really know what you're going to get. I used to say that I did not care for fantasy. And what I realized is I love a good fantasy if it has really strong developed characters. If it is super big on world building, and that is the most important part of the fantasy, it is going to lose me, and I'm probably not going to enjoy it, because that's not what I enjoy reading. But if it's got good, strong characters, I can kind of set aside the fact that the fantasy is fantasy, if that makes any sense. And I enjoy the story for what it is. And so I'm learning more about what I like, and it's less about the genre. And I think it's more about character development,
And I think I think you and I are on the same page, because even when I'm writing, I love getting into my characters and
Yeah.
showcasing my characters. So I'll write the story and then I'll go back and add a layer to the background.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, it's lacking. Like, I know where she is, but the reader doesn't know where she is.
Do the same thing. The very first one that I wrote was Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, and I got it to my editor, and she kind of came back at me with, Terry, we need a little more description. I don't know what these characters look like, and they literally could be anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so like, we got characters. What more do you need? And I've had to learn, yes, so we have to have some in there. It does matter where they are, and it does matter not necessarily what they look like, but to at least give someone like a small clue so they have somewhere to go, right? Yeah.
Is he tall? Is he short?
Yeah, like doesn't matter. Like, let's do something. I've always been the person that if I'm reading a book and they're going to go on for 3 pages about the wallpaper, that I'm just skimming until we get to where the character is again.
Exactly.
Right. And so I have the tendency to write that way, like, yeah. Places. Okay. People. Here we are.
Exactly. And I hate to say this. I'm going to call someone out on this, but it's somebody a long time ago. Moby Dick.
Yes.
The beginning of Moby Dick, and Moby Dick is a wonderful book. It is a wonderful story. So anybody who is like, this is your favorite book, I do not hate Moby Dick. I don't. But the beginning, where they're talking about the different whales and what they eat, and I was like, okay, can we get to our whale? Like, can
we get to the story? Can we get to great background information?
Am I going to be tested on whales?
Seriously. Yeah. So there is that. I think that a lot of the older authors, those long gone, did have that tendency to really produce almost a movie in your head.
Exactly.
Right. And I don't know, I'm way more about, let's get to the character. I want to know what they're thinking and why. And I want to know what their issue is. And I want to see how they're going to solve it. And, oh, you're sticking them with whales? Okay, great. Like,
and here's the thing. When I actually went back to read it to maybe think, because I read it when I was in junior high school.
Right.
So I was like, okay, maybe I should give
it was
grace,
just my age, right?
And I'll try it again. And I had to tell myself, listen, guess what? Nkrumah, chill out. He didn't have Google. All of his like, he had to maybe he had to explain whales to people who've never seen a whale.
Right.
I was like, so let's give this part some grace, but I'm still going to skip it.
You're still going skim. Oh, right. I completely agree.
I was like, I have Google.
Yeah. So I know that Anne was like very loosely then based on the idea of your friend, but who is Anne? Is she someone that you know personally, or is it a conglomerate of people, or did she just like pop up out of nowhere in your head? Or
she popped out of nowhere. She really did. And it was, I don't know anyone quite like her.
Okay.
No one. And I always think, people ask me, well, is this you? And I have to tell you, I hate that question. No, it's not me. I would not, just put it out there, I would not, if I had an arranged marriage, give up everything and run away and create a whole new life. I'm too scared. That's not Nkrumah. I'm scared. I'm not going to do that. So when she did it, she came to me like, tell my story. And so I'm telling her story, and I'm like, what are you, crazy?
Are you out of your mind?
Who does this?
Right.
But then every step of the way, when she meets a new character and she makes a decision, I'm like, wow, that's really great. I don't know if I'd do that.
Sometimes I think that I tell people that I write characters who I used to be, who I am now, or who I sometimes wish I could be.
Wish I could be. Yes.
And so what you see in Anne maybe is like the brave side of you, like if I could be a little braver, if I had a little more, I don't know, oomph, like I could just get out there and just do. Maybe this is what I would be, right?
Or, or I wish I could say that, or I wish,
Yeah.
yes,
I wish I could just say
yes,
that
very
out
much
loud. I
so.
wish I could just tell someone whatever. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Or my comebacks were as quick as theirs
Yes,
were.
seriously. And so it may be that Anne is you, just you as you wonder if you could be, or, give yourself another 30 years and you might say, well, look at this, age does something. I'm 61 actually. And so age does something where you just start saying, yeah, I am who I am, folks, like it or,
Yeah, I'm there. I'm
yeah,
there. And sometimes when things fall out of my mouth and
yeah.
I'm like, well, that's what I was thinking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. My mother will be 82 tomorrow, and she says all the time, "I'm 82. I can do what I want. I'm 82. I can say what I want." And I think there does come a point in your life where you do kind of get more like Anne, where you're just able to say and do what it is you feel like doing, and you don't worry quite so much about what the world is thinking of you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. When readers walk away, they finish the last words, other than saying, "Ooh, I can't wait for the second one."
Yeah.
What do you want them to walk away having gained or learned?
If there's anything didactic about my book, and it wasn't intentional, is that everyone who's in the book in one way or another is growing.
Yeah.
And as they're growing, you see some of them giving themselves grace and you see others who are not. And I want people to understand that everybody, even the older people in the story, have this growing arc, okay?
Exactly.
We're
Exactly.
always growing, we're always changing into new people. And I want them to see at the end that, oh yeah, this was really fun. And then second, give grace. You may not always know what other people are going through.
I like that idea. And I think that is so true, because regardless of where you are in life, you do keep growing. There are things that you're still learning. There are experiences that happen that you haven't experienced before, and you're trying to wade yourself through them. And then that idea that if that's happening to you, it's happening to everyone else. So when you meet someone at the grocery store, or you're sitting down to lunch with friends and someone's acting, in your mind crazy or out of control or whatever, you have no real idea what else it is that they're assimilating at the
Exactly.
moment, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't matter how close you are, because there are two characters who are very close and yet they don't understand one another.
Right.
And I'm like, you just don't know what this person's going through, and this person doesn't know what you're going through. And I hope that people notice that, and and do those characters eventually notice it? Well, I don't know. You have to read the next book.
You're gonna have to keep reading, folks. That's so about that. What is the next book? Is it available yet? When will it be available? How many of these do you plan to write? How far will Anne go? Let's hear a little more about what's next.
So actually, the second book is completed. We're hoping to release it next year. So there is a book 2. I'm expecting this to be a 7-book series, but it's not going to be just Anne. It's not going to be just Anne. So we're going to delve into other characters and do some other things and visit other places in Anne's little world. Is Anne going to be in those other stories? Yes, she will be there. She will be there, but she won't always be the main protagonist.
Fantastic. And so what is the second book called?
Anne of Ryland.
Anne of Ryland. Okay.
Yeah.
So is Ryland another ship, or is it a place?
Ryland is where she grew up. So she goes back.
She goes, so now, so we have a little clue.
Yeah, she goes back. Does she stay? I don't know.
I don't know. We'll have to read. No, you did a really good job with, first of all, like I said, as someone who was not convinced that young adult was something I was going to really enjoy, I did, and I read it very quickly. Like I sat down, I was on a little beach getaway where I just needed some downtime, and I read it very quickly while on this little getaway. Loved the book and immediately thought, oh, good, there's more. So that's really good. You did a good job. You left it wrapped up enough that I'm not like dying, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But with enough of, oh, good, the second one's coming out soon, then I can read it and find out what happened next. So you did a good job with that. When you got started with this first one, I'm just curious, this just came to me right now. When you got started with it, did you know from that point that you were going to have 7? Or did you plan on just writing 1?
Absolutely. I didn't plan on writing anything.
Okay.
Let's put there. I started writing this story, and I was thinking about my friend, and I wanted to give her a story. And I've always dabbled with writing, but more poetry when I was younger, because I didn't think I could write something so big as a novel. Right. And it just takes a lot of time. And I was like, I don't have time for that. And so when I sat down and Anne's story just came to me, it actually came to me as one book.
Okay.
But to publish it as one book, then you're looking at like Lord of the Rings as one book.
Right. And you can't do that.
You can't do that. You'll scare people. So, so I took it to my publisher, and they said, we're going to have to make this 2 or 3 books. And I agreed to 2. They were still pushing 3. And I talked to my editor, and she was like, it makes more sense for 2. And I was like, I'm glad you're on my side. Yeah. So we split it into 2 books. And then I had to write an ending to the first book.
Right.
And then a beginning to the second book. So that it kind of cleaned things up.
Right.
But when my eldest daughter is actually the one who found this manuscript, I wrote it in my 20s. And I even say how old I am now. I wrote it in my 20s.
Well, you don't look much more than 20s now, so you should just feel really good about that.
I appreciate it. I'm knocking on 50 and hoping it doesn't open the door. So she found the book, and she was in Battle of the Books. It's kind of like a Jeopardy for book readers.
Right.
And she's like, can I read this? And I was like, yeah. She goes, well, what is it? And I was like, oh, it's a book I wrote. She was like, you wrote a book? And I was like, yeah. So she decided to read it. Then she's like, do you mind if my friends read it? And I'm like, oh, go ahead. I don't care.
Yeah, whatever.
So her friends read it, and then they all came back to me, and they're harassing me about why I haven't gotten this published. And they want to know more about this character, and they want to know more about that character. And I was like, well, that one character, I've been wondering about that person myself. So when I started getting into, and this happened during COVID, I started thinking about publishing it. And when I got into that, I also got into, maybe I should look at this character again. And so that's where the extra books came in, is I decided to focus on another character within the story.
Fantastic. I love that. And I love how your daughter was kind of the impetus of getting things rolling for you. Here you have this manuscript, and she's like, hey, Mom, what? What? Why is this?
This is a whole new aspect of you.
Yes.
I didn't realize.
It's like, whoa, I didn't even know that this was a real thing. All right. Well, hey, folks, if you want to keep this book conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook, and you're going to have a chance to win a digital copy of Anne of Survivor. It's definitely something that you will want to read. So head right on over today. Tell me, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you a little bit more about your writing or what's coming up next, or potential ideas or anything like that, how do they get up with you? How do they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at the Nkrumah Mensah. They could also check out my website at www.between-the-line.com.
I'll have that in the show notes, guys. Fantastic.
And I try to check as much as I can and reach back out to people.
Fantastic. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. This has been a wonderful chat, and I've enjoyed myself thoroughly.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you too, Terry.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.